How strong can ant be? The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm golden light over the forest floor, where a group of young ants gathered in the shade of a towering oak tree. Their bodies, still small and untested, trembled slightly with excitement and nervousness, for they were about to set out on a long journey. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles they could not yet imagine, but there was one thing they knew for sure: Big Ant would be with them. Big Ant, their elder and guide, stood before them. Though his form was slightly larger than theirs, his presence was much greater. His legs were thick and sturdy, his antennae long and confident, and his back bore the strength of many seasons. The young ants looked up to him not just because of his size, but because of the wisdom he carried with him from countless journeys and challenges. As the young ants adjusted their tiny packs and prepared for the journey ahead, one of them, a curious ant named Zoc, gathered the courage to speak. "Big Ant," Zoc said, his voice a bit shaky but full of hope. "We've heard so many stories about your strength. Can you tell us a story of when you had to use your strength? Not just physical strength, but real strength." Big Ant's antennae twitched slightly, and he turned to face the group with a warm smile. He had heard this question before, many times. The young ants were eager to learn, to understand what it meant to be strong. "You want a story of strength?" Big Ant said thoughtfully, his deep voice resonating through the clearing. "I've faced many challenges in my time, but the one that stands out the most is the time when our colony faced the great test of unity. Let me tell you about the time we had to lift the Great Stone." The young ants exchanged excited glances. A story of lifting a stone sounded like just the kind of tale they needed to prepare for the journey ahead. Big Ant settled down on a large flat rock, his massive body taking up much of the space. The young ants gathered around him, their eyes wide, waiting for the tale to unfold. "It was many seasons ago," Big Ant began, "when our colony was in its prime. We had everything we needed: food, shelter, and a thriving community. But one day, something changed. A massive stone, a boulder the size of a tree, was unearthed by a mighty storm. It landed right in the middle of our foraging path, blocking the only route to a rich field of food that we had just discovered. The stone was enormous. No ant, no matter how strong, could move it alone. The small ants shivered at the thought of such an obstacle. A stone that big? How could any ant move it? We tried everything we could think of," Big Ant continued. One by one, ants of all sizes came forward, each eager to prove their strength. Some tried to push the stone with their backs. Some tried to lift it with their legs. But no matter what we did, the stone wouldn't budge. It was too heavy, too immovable. Our food supply was on the other side of it, and without it, our colony would go hungry. We had no choice but to find a way around. "But how?" Zoc asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "If no one could move it, how did you manage?" Big Ant chuckled, his deep voice softening with the memory. That's where the real strength comes in. You see, it wasn't just about brute force. It was about unity, about understanding that strength doesn't lie in one individual, but in the power of many working together. The answer wasn't for one ant to push harder or pull stronger. It was for all of us to come together, using our collective strength. The young ants were quiet now, hanging on to Big Ant's every word. At first, Big Ant continued, not everyone understood this. Some ants, like Pharaoh, the strongest of our colony, thought that if he just pushed hard enough, he could move the stone alone. He was large, strong, and had led many successful forages before. But this stone was different. No matter how hard he pushed, it didn't move. He was exhausted, and the others were beginning to lose hope. We had tried everything, and time was running out. Big Ant paused for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. Then, one of the younger ants, a scout named Syrah, had an idea. She was small, quick, and had always been the clever one in the colony. She gathered a group of us together and said, "If we work together, if we pull and push at the same time from different angles, we can move it. But we all have to be in sync. Every ant must contribute." Big Ant's eyes gleamed with admiration as he recalled the moment. Syrah's plan was simple, but brilliant. She didn't ask for anyone to do more than they could. Instead, She asked for each of us to do our part. It wasn't about one ant's strength, it was about how our collective strength could overcome the obstacle. The young ants looked at one another, processing the idea. So, you all work together? Sarah asked. Yes, Big Ant replied. At first, it wasn't easy. Pharaoh, who had always been the strongest, was hesitant. He didn't understand why he couldn't just lift the stone himself. But once he saw that everyone else was working together, pulling from their own strength, he joined in with the others. Big Ant stood up, his antennae raising high as if reliving the moment. We lined up along the stone, ants of all sizes, all shapes. Sarah stood at the front, directing the others. Push! Pull! Everyone, pull from your core, she instructed. And slowly, very slowly, the stone began to move. Zock's eyes were wide. It moved. Big Ant nodded. Yes, it did. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. But one by one, each ant contributed their strength. The larger ants pushed, the smaller ants pulled, and together, we made progress. It wasn't about overpowering the stone, it was about using every bit of strength we had, combined, in the right way. The young ants sat in silence, their eyes wide as they imagined the scene. After what seemed like hours, the stone finally shifted. It rolled, just enough for the path to be clear again. We had done it together. Big Ant's tone grew even more serious as he looked around at the group of young ants. You see, strength isn't always about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about understanding that no one ant is an island. When we work together, our collective strength can overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seems. Alone, we might fail, but together, we can accomplish things that are beyond our wildest imaginations. Zock, his eyes reflecting understanding, spoke first. So, it's not just about pushing harder or being strong? No, Big Ant said firmly. It's about understanding that everyone has a part to play. Each one of us has something to offer. No matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, every contribution counts. Strength is in the unity of the whole, not in the individual. Sarah, the young scout who had asked so many questions, now stood tall. So, we can do it too. Whatever obstacles lie ahead on our journey, we can overcome them by working together. Big Ant smiled, his deep voice warm and full of pride. Exactly, Sarah. You all have the strength within you. But remember, the key is to work as a team. No one can carry the burden alone. But together, there is no stone too large, no challenge too great. The young ants nodded, their hearts brimming with confidence. They had heard the story, and they understood now. The journey ahead would not be easy, but they had learned the true meaning of strength. And with each other's help, they could face whatever came their way. As they set off on their journey, the group of young ants walked with a newfound sense of purpose. Every obstacle they encountered, every challenge they faced, no longer seemed insurmountable. For they knew that as long as they worked together, using their collective strength, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Big Ant led the way, his heart light with pride, knowing that the young ants had learned the most important lesson of all: true strength comes from unity.